Professor Zara Velthorn adjusted her crystalline spectacles and gazed across the lecture hall of the Galactic University of Sciences. Her forearms gracefully gestured toward the holographic display, showing molecular structures that dance like fireflies in the artificial atmosphere. The assembled students, a colorful array of beings from across the galaxy, sat in various states of attention. Some floated in gravity pods, others perched on specialized seating designed for their unique anatomies. Today, class, we begin our final project for advanced planetary sciences, Zara announced, her melodic voice carrying the authority of someone who had taught for 3 centuries. Each of you will present a geological formation that demonstrates the fundamental forces shaping worlds across our galaxy. A soft murmur rippled through the diverse crowd. Tentacles twitched nervously, antennae swiveled with interest, and several students exchanged glances that conveyed both excitement and terror. In the back corner of the lecture hall sat Marcus Chun, the only human in a class of 47 students. His presence had caused quite the stir when he first enrolled 6 months ago. Deathworlders were rare in academic settings, preferring careers in mining, military service, or other occupations that utilize their notorious resilience and apparent disregard for personal safety. Marcus raised his hand, a simple gesture that caused several nearby students to flinch instinctively. "Yes, Marcus?" Professor Velthorn asked, her tone carefully neutral despite the slight tremor in her secondary vocal cords. "When you say geological formation, are there any specific restrictions on size, composition, or activity level?" Marcus inquired with the kind of casual tone one might use when asking about the weather. The professor's tertiary heart skipped a beat. In her 300 years of teaching, she had learned to recognize that particular inflection in a Deathworlder's voice. It was the same tone Marcus had used when asking if the Atmospheric Composition Lab had any safety protocols against explosive decompression. That experiment had resulted in the evacuation of an entire wing of the university and a strongly worded letter from the insurance company. Well, Zara began carefully. Traditionally, students present samples, models, or detailed scans of their chosen formations. The university's safety protocols require that all projects remain within acceptable risk parameters. Marcus nodded thoughtfully, already pulling out his personal data pad to take notes. Several students leaned away from him, their survival instincts finally honed after months of witnessing the humans' approach to academic pursuits. "And the deadline?" he asked, stylus poised over the screen. 4 weeks from today. That should provide ample time for research, acquisition of samples, and preparation of your presentations. As the class dispersed, Zeph Mortiki, a gelatinous fluidian who becomes something resembling Marcus's study partner, oozed over with obvious concern. "My friend," Zeph gurgled through his translation device, "please tell me you are not planning anything that will result in another campus evacuation. My species does not handle sudden atmospheric changes well." Marcus grinned, that particularly unsettling human expression that showed far too many teeth for most galactic citizens' comfort. "Relax, Zeph. I'm just thinking about doing something that really demonstrates the raw power of geological forces. Something authentic. That," interjected Kira Nexus, a 6-legged arachnoid from the Silk Nebula Systems, "is exactly what we were afraid you would say." Her mandibles clicked nervously as she spoke. "Remember what happened during your chemistry presentation?" "That was completely safe," Marcus protested. "The explosion was contained within the designated testing area. You created a miniature star." Kira's voice rose to a pitch that made several passing students' auditory organs ache. "A very small star," Marcus corrected, "and it only lasted for 3 seconds. Besides, everyone learns so much about fusion reactions." Zeph's gelatinous form rippled with what his species used to express deep resignation. "Please, for the sake of all our survival instincts, choose something simple, perhaps a nice sedimentary rock formation, or maybe some interesting mineral crystals." Marcus patted his friend's semi-solid shoulder with the kind of gentle care that somehow made the gesture even more ominous. "Don't worry, I've got the perfect idea. It's going to be educational, spectacular, and completely authentic." As Marcus walked away, humming what sounded suspiciously like a human war song, Zeph and Kira exchanged the kind of look that transcended species barriers. It was the universal expression of beings who knew they were about to witness something extraordinary, terrifying, and probably expensive to repair. Over the following days, Marcus threw himself into his research with a methodical intensity that had made him both famous and feared throughout the university. He spent hours in the geological databases, cross-referencing planetary formation data with transportation logistics and safety protocols. His browsing history alone was enough to trigger 3 separate security alerts from the campus monitoring systems. Dr. Hendrix Quan, the human liaison officer and the only other member of his species on campus, found himself fielding increasingly frantic calls from various department heads. "Hendrix," came the strained voice of Professor Velthorn through his communication device, "your student has been requesting access to the university's heavy transport vessels. He also asked about the maximum temperature tolerances of our lecture hall materials." Dr. Quan rubbed his temples, feeling the familiar headache that accompanied any discussion of Marcus Chen's academic pursuits. What exactly did he say he needed the transport for? He mentioned something about field collection and maintaining specimen integrity during transport. When I asked for more details, he just smiled and said it would be a real blast. The liaison officer closed his eyes and counted 10 in 3 different languages. "I'll talk to him." That afternoon, Dr. Quan found Marcus in the university's advanced fabrication lab, surrounded by what appeared to be custom-designed containment equipment. The devices were clearly built to withstand extreme temperatures and pressures, with reinforced molecular bonding and emergency release mechanisms that suggested their contents might be somewhat more dangerous than the average rock sample. "Marcus," Dr. Quan began, using the tone he had perfected during his years of keeping human students from accidentally declaring war on peaceful alien civilizations, "I think we need to discuss your science project." Marcus looked up from his work, his face bright with the kind of enthusiasm that had historically preceded some of humanity's most questionable achievements. "Dr. Quan, perfect timing. I wanted to run some calculations by you regarding thermodynamics and structural integrity. Before we get into calculations, why don't you tell me exactly what you're planning to present?" Marcus set down his fabrication tools and turned to face his mentor with the expression of someone about to share wonderful news. "I'm going to bring in an active volcanic system, a real one, complete with magma chamber, thermal vents, and seismic activity." Dr. Quan felt his blood pressure spike to levels that would have concerned a medical professional. "Marcus, when you say bring in, you don't mean a live, fully functional volcano," Marcus confirmed cheerfully. "I found the perfect specimen on Pyrothea 7. It's a beautiful example of shield volcano formation with regular eruption cycles and fascinating mineral compositions in the lava flows. You want to transport an active volcano to the university. Just a small one," Marcus said, as if the size of the geological catastrophe somehow made it more reasonable. "The main cone is only about 2 kilometers across. The magma chamber extends maybe 5 kilometers down. Very manageable." Dr. Quan sat down heavily in the nearest chair, which groaned under the sudden weight. "Marcus, you do realize that volcanoes are not typically considered portable, right? That's the beauty of it." Marcus's eyes lit up with the fervor of someone who had solved a particularly challenging puzzle. Everyone always presents dead rock samples or holographic models, but a volcano is a living system. It demonstrates plate tectonics, igneous formation, atmospheric interaction, and ecosystem development all in one package. It also demonstrates property destruction, mass casualties, and the kind of insurance claims that can bankrupt entire star systems. Marcus waved dismissively. "That's why I designed proper containment protocols. The transport containers will maintain the magma at optimal temperatures during transit, and the presentation chamber will have full environmental controls." Dr. Quan realized he was experiencing a peculiar mixture of pride and terror that seemed to define interactions with gifted human students. On one hand, the engineering challenge Marcus was proposing was genuinely impressive. On the other hand, it was also genuinely insane. Have you considered the reactions of your professors, your classmates, the campus safety committee that still hasn't recovered from your chemistry demonstration? They'll love it, Marcus said with the confidence of someone who had clearly never experienced true galactic panic. It's hands-on learning at its finest. Plus, Professor Velthorn is always talking about how geology should be experienced, not just observed. I don't think she meant it quite so literally. Marcus began pulling up holographic displays showing his transport designs, containment systems, and presentation setup. Despite his mounting horror, Dr. Quan found himself genuinely impressed by the thoroughness of planning. The human had accounted for thermal regulation, seismic dampening, atmospheric containment, and emergency protocols that were actually quite comprehensive. "You've really thought this through," Dr. Quan admitted reluctantly. "Of course. Safety is paramount when dealing with active geological systems. I've even included contingency plans for unexpected eruption events during transport." "Unexpected eruption events," Dr. Quan repeated slowly. "During transport to a university campus. The probability is quite low," Marcus assured him. Pyrotheus 7's volcanic activity follows very predictable patterns. I've studied 6 months of seismic data. Dr. Quan realized that Marcus was going to proceed with this plan regardless of any arguments about sanity, safety, or the basic laws of civilized society. The question became whether it was better to try to stop him or to help ensure that when the inevitable disaster occurred, it would at least be a well-engineered disaster. "Show me the containment specifications," he said finally. As Marcus eagerly began explaining his designs, neither human noticed a small recording device that had been placed in the laboratory by a very concerned Professor Velthorn. Within minutes, emergency alerts were cascading through the university's communication systems, triggering meetings that would continue well into the night and result in policy changes that would affect academic institutions across the galaxy. The countdown to the most memorable science presentation in galactic history had officially begun. Part 2, When Mountains Come to Class. 3 weeks later, the Galactic University of Sciences resembled a maximum security prison more than an academic institution. Emergency response teams had established perimeters around the Geological Sciences building. Insurance adjusters circled the campus like vultures, their probability calculators smoking from overuse. The local fire department had relocated their entire fleet to the university grounds, despite the fact that their equipment was designed for ordinary fires, not geological catastrophes. Professor Velthorn stood in the emergency command center that had been hastily constructed in what used to be the faculty lounge. Her 4 arms moved in perfect coordination as she monitored seismic readings, reviewed evacuation protocols, and consumed alarming quantities of anxiety medication. "Status report," she commanded, her usually melodic voice now carrying the sharp edge of someone who had not slept properly in days. Commander Rex Vorthen of the University Security Force stepped forward, his reptilian features showing the strain of preparing for what he had begun calling Operation Volcanic Nightmare in his personal logs. "Transport convoy arrived at the outer system checkpoint 4 hours ago. The containment readings are within acceptable parameters, though the definition of acceptable has been significantly revised since this project began." "How significantly revised?" asked Dean Mira Skystone, the crystal-based administrator whose natural transparency had become unfortunately literal, revealing stress fractures throughout her molecular structure. "Let's just say the previous safety standards assumed students would limit themselves to things that were already dead. Through the reinforced windows of the command center, they could see the evacuation of nearby buildings. Students and faculty members streamed away from the Geological Sciences complex with the organized urgency of beings who had learned not to question human-related safety protocols. "Has anyone considered simply failing him?" suggested Professor Lynn Vox, the photosynthetic plant being who taught introductory biology and had never encountered anything more dangerous than an aggressive flower. "Unfortunately," sighed the dean, "his project proposal was technically approved. Our oversight committee spent 3 days looking for regulations that would prohibit transporting active geological features, and apparently no one thought to write those rules." "Why would they?" Commander Vorthen asked reasonably. "Most species consider volcanoes to be permanently attached to their planets." Dr. Quan entered the command center, his human features showing the peculiar combination of pride and dread that had become his default expression. "I've just spoken with Marcus. The transport is proceeding smoothly. The volcano is, and I quote, behaving perfectly." "Volcanoes do not behave," Professor Velthorn stated firmly. They erupt. They destroy. They turn perfectly reasonable academic institutions into smoking craters. Marcus seems quite confident in his containment systems. Marcus is a Deathworlder, the dean pointed out. His definition of safety involves things that would cause any rational being to evacuate several star systems. The communications array crackled to life with the voice of Transport Captain Zoe Titan, the human freight specialist who had been the only pilot willing to undertake the job. Her reputation for moving impossible cargo through dangerous conditions had made her the obvious choice, despite the fact that her insurance premiums were legendary throughout the shipping industry. Command, this is Transport One. We're beginning final approach. The volcano is secure and stable. I've got beautiful seismic readings, and the magma temperature is holding steady at optimal levels. Professor Velthorn activated the response channel with one of her trembling hands. Captain Titan, please remind me again why this seemed like a reasonable idea. Because, Professor, this is the kind of educational opportunity that comes along once in a lifetime. Your students are about to witness geological processes that most beings only see in textbooks. The students who survive, muttered Commander Vorthen. I have complete faith in human engineering, Captain Titan continued cheerfully. These containment systems are masterpieces of thermodynamics and pressure regulation. The kid knows what he's doing. Through the observation windows, the transport convoy became visible as tiny dots growing larger against the star-filled sky. The main transport vessel was a massive industrial hauler, designed for moving entire mining operations between systems. Behind it followed a fleet of support ships loaded with monitoring equipment, emergency response gear, and what appeared to be enough medical supplies to treat casualties from a small war. Estimated arrival at Presentation Hall in 47 minutes, came Captain Titan's voice. Beginning final systems check now. In the Geological Sciences building, Marcus Chun made final adjustments to the specialized presentation chamber that had been constructed for his project. The room had been reinforced with materials capable of withstanding temperatures that could melt most known alloys. Emergency vents had been installed to handle potential atmospheric complications. The viewing area had been protected by barriers that could theoretically stop a charging Rigelian battle rhinoceros. Zeph approached his human friend with the cautious movement of someone who had learned that Deathworlders could make dangerous situations exponentially worse without any malicious intent. Marcus, my gelatinous companion, asks once more, are you absolutely certain this will not result in campus-wide destruction? Marcus looked up from his final calibrations, his face glowing with the satisfaction of someone whose impossible project was about to succeed. Zeph, I promise you this presentation will be unforgettable. The volcanic system I've selected demonstrates every major principle of geological formation: active lava flows, gas emissions, seismic activity, mineral deposition. It's a complete education in planetary sciences. That is precisely what terrifies me. Kira Nexus skittered into the chamber, her 6 legs moving in a rapid pattern that indicate extreme nervousness among her species. The transport convoy just entered orbit. The seismic monitoring stations are detecting readings from space. From space, Marcus. That's just the containment systems maintaining proper pressure equilibrium, Marcus explained patiently. The volcano needs to remain in its natural state for presentation to be authentic. Natural state, Kira repeated slowly. You have brought a natural disaster to our classroom. I prefer to think of it as bringing the classroom to nature. The ground beneath their feet began to vibrate gently as the massive transport vessel settled into the specially constructed landing pad adjacent to the Geological Sciences building. The vibrations were carefully controlled, designed to minimize seismic disruption, but they were still strong enough to rattle equipment and cause several nearby students to question their life choices. Professor Velthorn arrived at the presentation chamber accompanied by the entire emergency response team, 3 insurance investigators, and a documentary crew from the Galactic Educational Network, who had gotten wind of the situation and decided this was either going to be the greatest educational moment in galactic history or the most spectacular academic disaster ever recorded. Marcus, Professor Velthorn began, her voice carrying the kind of desperate authority of someone trying to maintain control of an increasingly impossible situation. Before we begin, I need your absolute assurance that your containment systems are functioning perfectly. Professor, I've run diagnostics on every component 17 times. The thermal regulation is holding steady, pressure management is optimal, and the seismic dampeners are functioning within acceptable parameters. Define acceptable parameters. Marcus consulted his data pad with the casual confidence of someone discussing routine maintenance. The current seismic output is registering at approximately 2.3 on the Richter scale. That's barely noticeable by human standards. We are not humans, Commander Vorthen pointed out through gritted teeth. Most galactic species consider anything above 0.5 to be a potential emergency. The beauty of controlled volcanic demonstration is that you get to experience authentic geological forces in a safe, educational environment. Through the reinforced windows, they could see the massive containment vessel being maneuvered into position. Steam rose from cooling vents along its sides, and the air shimmered with heat distortion that spoke of incredible temperatures barely contained within technological marvels of engineering. Captain Titan's voice crackled through the communication system. Transport 1 to command. Cargo is secure and ready for deployment. All systems green. Beginning final transfer to presentation chamber. The moment everyone had been dreading and anticipating, in equal measure, had finally arrived. Marcus activated the chamber's viewing screens, which displayed real-time data from sensors monitoring every aspect of his geological guest. Ladies, gentlemen, and beings of various classifications, Marcus announced with the enthusiasm of someone about to share something wonderful, I present to you a complete volcanic system, transported live from Pyrotheus 7 for your educational experience. The containment vessel's massive doors began to open with the slow, deliberate movement of engineering designed to handle forces that could reshape continents. Steam billowed out in carefully controlled patterns, carrying with the distinctive sulfurous scent of active volcanic processes. And then, through the steam and mechanical precision of human engineering, the most impossible sight in academic history became visible. A living, breathing, actively erupting volcano sat in the center of the presentation chamber. Lava flowed in carefully channeled patterns that demonstrated igneous rock formation. Gas vents released precisely measured amounts of volcanic gases that illustrated atmospheric interaction. The magma chamber pulsed with the rhythm of geological forces that had shaped worlds since the beginning of time. It was magnificent. It was terrifying. It was absolutely, undeniably real. Professor Velthorn stared at the impossible sight before her 4 hearts beating in patterns that would have concerned any medical professional. Marcus, this is without question the most spectacular, educational, and completely insane presentation in the history of galactic academics. Marcus beamed with pride. Thank you, Professor. Now, let me walk you through the fascinating process of shield volcano formation, starting with the magma composition and thermodynamics. As he began his presentation, explaining the intricate details of volcanic processes with the passion of someone who truly understood his subject, the assembled crowd realized they were witnessing something unprecedented. Despite the chaos, the emergency protocols, and the complete disruption of normal academic procedures, they were learning about geological sciences in a way that no textbook could ever provide. The volcano continued its controlled demonstration, each eruption timed and measured to illustrate different aspects of planetary formation. It was educational. It was authentic. It was absolutely extraordinary. And somewhere in the back of everyone's mind was the growing realization that human students were going to make academic life very interesting for years to come. The presentation continued, and against all expectations and several laws of probability, everything worked exactly as planned. Marcus had successfully transported, contained, and controlled an active geological system for educational purposes. It was the kind of achievement that would be remembered throughout galactic history, assuming anyone survived long enough to write about it. Questions? Marcus asked cheerfully as his presentation concluded. The silence that followed was a kind that typically preceded either standing ovations or mass evacuations. In this case, it was probably going to be both.